Hey everybody, this is Dr. Kevin McGovern, along with my colleague Clay Hammonds, another Velocity RX podcast. And this one is dealing with the health of the spine and the baseball pitcher. Um, the spine, in my opinion, is where everything starts and finishes. It is vital to athleticism, it's vital to health in general. Um, and it's the first thing that I clear when evaluating any human being coming in for Velocity RX, coming in with a knee problem, coming with anything. It has to start at the spine. That is our building, and our arms and legs are add-on bridges or appendages to another building. So, without further ado, Mr. Hammonds, how are you? Dr. Hammonds, how's it going?
I'm doing well, Kevin. How you doing, man?
Good. So, um, you've got let's just say you got a player coming in, you got your
Yep.
average Joe coming in. What are you concerned about with the spine?
Mobility first and foremost. Depending on what they're coming in on, but I mean, typically the vast majority of what I see is a lack of extension, and
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 where? Lumbar spine, thoracic spine, cervical
thoracic
spine?
spine,
Thoracic.
thoracic spine. I mean, sometimes the lumbar too. I mean, depending on what they're dealing with, but I would say vastly far more the thoracic spine. Thoracic lumbar junction and mid-level T spines just aren't moving well into extension because we function primarily as humans in flexion every day. And especially when we're yeah, and especially when we're dealing with the youth population,
Big
uh,
time.
they're in school, they're carrying backpacks, they're always here in this posture, and so we get a little bit of increased kyphosis, and that can lead to a plethora of problems, especially when we're talking about overhead throwing motions, pitching, that sort of thing.
So I find, yeah, so for those playing at home, thoracic spine, I agree, um, is lacking extension. Um, and the other thing that we don't, or is not readily known, is you got multiple joints at the thoracic spine, because your thoracic spine also houses our ribs, and our ribs are moving every second of every day. And you're probably wondering that at home, like, what are you talking about? Well, every time we talk, every time we inhale, exhale, breathe, or whatever, our ribs are moving, right? They're kind of what's called a pump handle effect, like an old well. They're kind of doing this. And when we have a lack of mobility of our ribs, it could even affect as far down as our breathing, let alone any sort of musculoskeletal. So in addition to thoracic spine, the other part I find, I call it the executive posture, and kids have it now, is that L5 vertebrae is a speed bump, right? And what I mean by that is, there's, as Clay alluded to, we have three curves of our spine. Two inward curves, one at our neck and our lumbar spine, called lordosis, and the kyphotic curve, the outward curve, is in our thoracic spine. But right at the bottom, our L5, if you want to feel for it at home, is just the first vertebrae above our essential tailbone area. It's right at the waistband of your pants, maybe a smidge lower, depending on how you're wearing your pants. And people who sit a lot, that vertebrae tends to be a speed bump. So as you're palpating it, you'll find a little bump, right, Clay? Do you see that a lot? And
Mhm.
literally, when that spine moves out of position, bad things happen. So just and we'll talk about the thoracic spine, but just that alone, that vertebrae, that speed bump, is literally going to diminish the strength of your kinetic chain, your posterior kinetic chain. And you could test somebody, um, initially flip them over, have them lie on a half foam roller longitudinally to push that back in using gravity. And literally, as soon as that even moves a millimeter, their strength increases. And how many kids are walking around today hunched over? I know my kid is, I'm constantly saying, stand up straight, stand up straight, stand up straight. My grandmother used to thump me in the back, but I don't think you can do that nowadays. But what do you see in terms of lower back issues.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would say, the vast majority of people I tend to treat based on the McKinsey method a lot. And so I'm trying to find how are you going to respond? Are you going to be a flexion responder or an extension responder? About 88% of the population are extension responders. So this is dealing with any type of lower extremity issue that you may be having. Could be knee pain, could be ankle pain, could be toe pain, any sort of dysfunction. When you go and test their strength, they're going to be usually weak in a myotome, and they're going to lack some lumbar extension and or flexion. Like I said, about 88% of the time extension. And then so when we get down and we do repeated extensions, getting into some overpressure and extension, their strength comes back. So you're just creating some more motion for that nerve root to sit in, and then your strength comes back, mobility comes back, everything's able to move better.
So it's funny you bring that up. I have, and I think you noticed or commented on a review that was just done. I have the Jose Maria Olazabal rule, the JMO rule. And for those playing at home, Jose Maria Olazabal was a world-class golfer from Spain who I believe in your state won what's called the Masters
Mm.
and then disappeared, right? A couple years, like, where did this guy go? He completely disappeared off the circuit. And come to find out, he had multiple foot operations for what was diagnosed as plantar fasciitis or something, tendonitis of the foot, something having to do with the foot. And they weren't working. Then get back on tour, and he had all these operations. And then one person said, "Hey, why don't we follow up that L5S1 nerve root to the back?" And he had one L5S1 discectomy, and his foot pain went away because the foot pain was being caused by disruption in his back. So
Yeah,
the first thing I always investigate or um, look at is the spine for that reason. I don't care what kind
sure.
of pain you're having. I'm looking and clearing from head to toe the alignment of that spine.
100%. I can't, tell you how many times that I've alleviated somebody's knee, hip, or ankle or toe pain by evaluating the spine, treating the spine, and then oh, you went away. Oh, what? You mean your plantar fasciitis just went away, and you've had it for 3, 4 months? Well, it
Yeah,
wasn't
I
your
mean the
wasn't
gal that you saw, they were going about to
plantar
do a
fasciitis.
nerve.
It's a nerve issue.
Yeah, they were about to do a nerve ablation on her foot, and it was coming from her back. I mean, can you imagine that extensive surgery and it was a back issue?
Crazy.
So, I know we've talked a lot of, mumbo jumbo, but, for the parent at home, you know, this travel ball phenomenon, like, is, gone off the roof. Now, I will say back in 2008, I started doing strength and conditioning with a travel ball program. We didn't know anyone in Massachusetts that was doing any kind of strength and conditioning with their travel ball program. Now, everyone's doing it. But we were doing it as a physical therapy company with physical therapists, trainers, strength and conditioning people. Now we've got coaches, parents, whomever doing exercises that would put tremendous pressure on the spine. And two of those movements that I see a lot and incredibly poorly performed is the squat and the deadlift. Now, I am a huge squat and deadlift proponent, but it has to be done with absolute expert precision, or the person is going to get hurt. So I don't know how many kids I've seen come in my office and tell me they could squat 300 pounds. Yeah, when they do an air squat, I can push them over with one finger because it's done inappropriately. What do you see on your end about that issue?
Yeah, I mean, squats done very poorly a lot of times. With I always like to look at their hip hinge. Like, can you even hip hinge? That's a big thing I see, especially when in kids, is they have no hip hinge, right? They want to fall forward, not putting weight back on the heels, zero hip hinge, and then they start to further they go down, they start to kind of lose their lordosis and get into more flex position, I guess you would say. That's what I see a lot, especially in youth athletes just not able to perform a squat correctly. It's going to set you up for a lot of bad things down the line because everything that we do, especially in baseball, is I mean we're squatting a lot. So
I mean, obviously, I think it's the most important movement of any athlete is to be able to do a perfect squat.
mm,
So, what do you tell parents who like how do we prevent injury, knowing that alignment of the spine is vital? Um, and I will see these strength conditioning programs where they're unsupervised, um, Olympic weightlifting, and the movement is we'll call less than ideal. What should parents do to either prevent injury or make sure that they're in the proper program, or what should be going on?
well, I mean, I think it'd be a great thing to go have somebody like you or I screen them first and foremost and say, are you fit to play the sport or are you set up for injury? And most of the time they're not really fit for the sport and they're set up for injury. So what are the key takeaways on the exam that you can find that you can say, hey, we can start doing this, and this now to to build these basic blocks up to put you in a position where you're not going to get injured. And I think that would be, if everybody did that and went more on the prevention side of it rather than wait until there's a problem, um, A, you'd spend less money down the line, and then B, you wouldn't be injured. So that's, my take on it.
Agreed. And one thing parents can do at home to you know to self test their child is get a hard chair and have them stand with their feet a little bit wider than shoulder widths in standing, and then have them sit down into the chair and control it the whole way, right? So if they plop down, that means they can't do a proper squat. They should not be lifting any weights. And more, the most important thing, when their butt hits the ground, that inward curve of their back should still be inwardly curved. It should still be, that lordotic curve should be there. The biggest thing that I see is two big faults: knee going forward over toe first, loss of lumbar lordosis, and then tertiary would be the plop. So if your kid cannot do a proper air squat with a chair behind them, there is no way they should be lifting any weight, any kind of weight in their hands, on their back, anything like that. What
And
say
I'll kind
you?
of add one to that too is decreased activation of the glute. So becoming totally quad dominant with it. And then you'll
Yep,
kind of see like if you have headlights on your kneecaps, you don't want to see those headlights cross. So you get that kind
great
of
point.
knee valgus. That's a huge red flag. Like you have no glute activation. Not that it's not there, you're just not using it correctly.
Yep, great
And
point.
so that's what I see a lot, as well.
And again, any program that your son or daughter is going to, and you're going to start doing strength and conditioning that involves Olympic weights or free weights, and even machines for that matter, they need to be screened either, and not screened by, turn your head and cough. I mean, the school physicals, they're not enough. What do they do? Blood pressure, pulse. You need someone to truly measure their musculoskeletal movement, or they're going to get hurt. It's just a, it's just a matter of time. Like all those exercises are fine and dandy if the spine is cleared. And moving to that, um, I see a lot of people will forward me pictures all the time. And the biggest thing that I'm seeing out there is rotation of the spine. And I'll see someone will send me these water bags with having it on the kid's shoulder and medicine balls that they're turning and slamming into walls. And of course, I'm always asking, has the spine been cleared to do high level, high velocity rotational movements? What say you?
Yeah, I would agree. Like I'm fine with those exercises. I think they're good in some capacity, but are you ready to do them?
Right.
Is your spine elastic enough for you to do them? Um, because baseball pitching, especially, it's a rotational
Mm-hmm.
sport. You
Absolutely.
have to rotate. And when you're looking at the facet joints, like I said, we're usually really good with flexion, so we're good with that upward motion of the facets, but not so much the downward motion. So whenever we rotate, if we are already lacking extension, which the vast majority of the population is, we're not going to have one side extend. You're going to have the one side be able to go up, but the other side isn't going to be able to extend. So you're not going to be able to rotate fully. And in order for you, and this goes back to arm injuries that I'm really big on, is why I'm big on the thoracic spine, is I think, we are lacking thoracic extension. We're not able to get the good enough hip shoulder separation or elastic coil that we need. And then that force then goes straight to the shoulder and elbow. And so that's when you get, you're kind of big on the excessive layback. And so if we're lacking spinal mobility, we're not going to get the layback that we would get from rotating our spine back. It's going to come from more of the external rotation at end range. And so the more of that we can have, the less stress that we can have there on the arm.
Absolutely. And I put up a picture very quickly of, essentially what a facet joint is. And I always would tell people it's kind of like two trains kind of locking together. And in this picture, you see the body of the spine, this big, thicker bone, and these little bones off the back. Those are facet joints. They're tiny, right? They're not these big, not these big bones, right? And when you're doing something that with speed and force, I mean, you're literally as you rotate, what's should be stopping you is your muscle system. What's probably stopping you on someone who's not a clear is bone on bone, bone on bone. And I've literally this year alone I've seen two transverse process fractures on kids 15 years and under. And that's what were you doing? Well, I was taking you know, this heavy ball and slamming it into the wall to help my rotation.
Yeah.
There go. So the like you said, the exercises isn't bad. We need spinal rotation, but to get spinal rotation isn't just from the spine. We've got the pelvis, we've got, how's the hip moving, how's the foot moving, which goes back to again, before doing these high level things, your kid needs to be screened by someone who knows how the body moves.
Yep. 100%.
So we talked about the lumbar spine, and we you started this with the thoracic spine. So let's kind of segue back there. What do you see from lack of extension of the thoracic spine? What is coming out of there? What are you seeing for movement issues or injuries or what have you?
Yeah, like I said, I think I see a lot of shoulder and elbow pain from not having thoracic extension. Because like I
Agreed.
said, if you can't, so we're talking about the sequential um, sequence of throwing, pitching. We want our pelvis to go first, and then our trunk, and then our arm. So whenever your pelvis goes, rotates forward, we want to have hip shoulder separation. So we need to have counter rotation of our T spine. And if we don't have that, and so like that should create a lot of the layback for you is just coming from your spine. But if you're not having that and you're short, and then you're going to get layback more from that coming
Right at the lay back at the shoulder and elbow
layback
rather
at
than
this. Yeah, so
at
you're
the
getting
thoracic spine. Agreed.
yes, you're getting excessive shoulder external rotation, valgus stress on the elbow that should be coming from the spine. Um, pro pitchers that are really good whenever their front foot lands have about plus or minus 55 degrees of thoracic rotation. Um, and that's why they're able to generate the forces that they do. I think, a couple of the guys that were really good at that were a la like a Tim Lincecum, the
Mm-hmm.
freak.
Mm-hmm.
Stroman's really good at it. Aroldis Chapman's really good at it. Having hip shoulder separation, good spinal mobility. I mean, look at, I mean, Lincecum was what, 5'11", 170 pounds soaking wet, sat 93 to 97. I think he hit 101. Like, how did he do that? Like, he wasn't a big
Right.
dude. He had,
Right.
I mean, if you go look at his spinal extension, he had crazy spinal extension and rotation. And he was like,
Wasn't a fan of his arm path, but yeah, just like
yeah,
I'm not a fan of Chapman's arm path, but his
but
drop and
his but
drive
his but
and
his trunk
spine.
and his
Yep.
and his spine was phenomenal, and that's why he was able to generate it. And so I think that is a huge thing for me that I see. A lot of arm injuries, especially shoulder and elbow, due to lack of T-spine rotation, which the main component of that is going to be extension. You don't have the extension enough to be able to rotate that side of your facet joint.
I love it. Now, the thing that I see when we talk about posture and, and kyphotic or protracted posture is the position of our shoulder blade. And the shoulder blade on top of the rib cage, we as physical therapists call that a joint, even though that doesn't essentially make up the classic definition. There's no ligamentous thing holding the shoulder blade there, but it's held there by muscles in a very specific ratio. And you and I have hammered that home, which is our scapulohumeral rhythm.
Right.
And as you become more forward flexed, as those shoulder blades start to protract, our bully friend, the Rocky muscles, the upper trap muscles start to engage and drive that shoulder blade upwards where we want it to be downwardly rotated. And I call that, the executive posture, but obviously with adolescence, it's the video game or the iPhone posture where kids are, doing this all day long, and that shoulder blade, never stays in the right in the position. And one of my game tests, you can see, I've seen hundreds of these that, those muscles now, depending you're right-handed, left-handed, those shoulder blades don't move. And no one moves perfectly one side or the other, but you can really see, middle trap, lower trap, rhomboid in adolescence, they're just not there. And then, you know, they're throwing balls against the walls or they're doing things that aren't promoting even good positioning of the shoulder blade, which is vital to pitching health, but also vital to, as you just said, generating velocity. Like it's vital. And like when I talk to pitchers in all levels, you talk to them about, yeah, I want you to, land this foam roller and do scapular depression exercises. They've never heard of it. When I was with the Nashua Pride, right, the independent team, and all these guys kept coming in and I would get like I got the Yankees, the Rangers, the Indians, the Braves, couple other of their strength and conditioning books and rehab things. And I opened it up and I'm like, yeah, no wonder you never made it back from injury. Like, you know, shoulder shrugs, lateral raises. Like, dude, like there's no worse exercise on the planet than a straight lateral raise. We're not birds, right? And they're like, we're not supposed to do those. I'm like, did your shoulder feel good after you did those? Well, no, it always hurt. Yeah, right. And it's just insane. So I know you got to run. We like to keep these short, but we do have to thank one of my clients is on, and Mark, if you do you have any questions that we haven't covered that you'd like to know before we get out of here?
Yeah, just for like a youth pitcher, thinking through these things, what are some, exercises or drills or anything like to incorporate there? I mean, I know we're following the plan, but like what are some specific things for that, like to help with that extension and, mobility in the thoracic spine?
great question. Clay, what do you go first and then I'll follow up whatever you don't talk about.
Yeah, so I like to just incorporate, a few like stretches, mobility exercises. I think cat cows are a really good one, forcing down into extension. I like prone, um, getting in the prone position and pressing up into extension, making sure your shoulder blades are down and back. I like doing the cobra over a ball to kind of train the musculature as well to get an extension. And I love quadruped, so kind of getting on all fours and then just kind of threading through like a needle and then coming up in a rotation as well. I think those are some just easy mobility drills that you can do to get the spine a little bit more elastic and kind of work into extension.
And I love, lying longitudinally on a half foam roller. Number one, that's going to use our friend Siraj Newton and gravity to get mobility between each spinal level and the juncture of the rib and the spine. And then, swimmers or moving arms or legs, even rotation on there is going to help. I mean, the thoracic spine, by definition, we're always stiff. It just doesn't have a lot of movement, but in the pitching motion, we're really forcing it to the end. So it needs to be both pliable and stable at the same time and moving correctly. So that's a good question. All right, Clay, I know you got to go see in your new office there. So how can people get a hold of you now that you're all fancy in your new fancy office?
Yeah, so you reach me by email, Clay at performancesolutionsrehab.com. I've also got a website landing page up. There's going to be, more to the website coming soon. So www.performancesolutionsrehab.com. Visit me there. At Clay Ham on Instagram. Just, more than happy to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Fantastic. And you can get me at velocityrx.org and at K McGovern PT at all of your finer social media outlets. And we'll be back with some more topics on our next session. So thanks for listening.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, Kevin.